Nestled in the heart of a bustling city, Willow Creek was once a serene neighborhood of independently owned homes. The streets were lined with towering oak trees, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a mosaic of shadows on the pavement. Children rode their bikes down the quiet streets, and neighbors chatted over white picket fences, sharing stories and laughter. It was a place where everyone knew each other by name, a community bound by mutual respect and a shared love for their little slice of paradise. For Emily Carter, Willow Creek was more than just a neighborhood, it was home. She had moved there with her husband, Daniel, 10 years ago, drawn by the charm and tranquility of the area. They had fallen in love with a quaint, standalone townhouse that sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. The house was modest, but it had a large backyard that Daniel had immediately envisioned transforming into their private oasis. Over the years, they had poured their hearts into creating a beautiful courtyard with a small pool, surrounded by lush gardens and a cozy patio. It was their sanctuary, a place where they could escape the chaos of the city and create memories together. But everything changed when the developers arrived. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a letter. Emily found it in her mailbox one sunny afternoon, the crisp white envelope standing out among the usual bills and advertisements. The letterhead bore the name Willow Creek Homeowners Association in bold, imposing letters. Emily frowned as she read the contents, a polite invitation to join the newly formed HOA, promising benefits like increased property value and shared maintenance responsibilities. At first, Emily dismissed the letter. She had no interest in joining an HOA. Her property was her own, and she had no desire to be bound by someone else's rules. But the letters kept coming, each one more insistent than the last. The tone shifted from polite invitations to thinly veiled threats of mandatory participation and community compliance. Emily began to feel uneasy. She had heard stories from friends in other neighborhoods about overbearing HOAs that fined residents for the smallest infractions, from the color of their front doors to the height of their grass. She didn't want that kind of control in her life. Then, one day, a representative from the HOA showed up at her door. He was a tall, well-dressed man with a clipboard in hand and a practiced smile on his face. He introduced himself as Mark Thompson, the president of the Willow Creek HOA, and asked if Emily had considered updating her home to better align with the neighborhood's new standards. Emily politely declined, but the visit left her feeling unsettled. She couldn't shake the feeling that the HOA had its sights set on her property. The first major confrontation came on a warm Saturday afternoon. Emily was inside her home, enjoying a quiet moment with a book, when she heard the faint sound of laughter and music coming from outside. At first, she thought it was just a neighbor having a small gathering, but as the noise grew louder, she decided to investigate. What she found made her blood boil. Dozens of strangers were lounging in her courtyard, grilling on her barbecue, and splashing in her pool as if they owned the place. The scene was chaotic. Plastic cups and paper plates littered the ground. Children were cannonballing into the pool, and someone had even dragged her patio furniture into the water. Emily's heart raced as she approached a man who was lounging by the pool with a drink in hand. "What is going on here?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. The man barely glanced at her. "It's the HOA pool party. Didn't you get the flyer?" Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. "The flyer? This is my property. You're trespassing." The man shrugged, unfazed. "The HOA said this is their pool now. Talk to the president if you've got a problem." Emily's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. She stormed through the crowd, her anger growing with each step. She finally found Mark Thompson, the HOA president, standing near the pool with a smug smile on his face. "Who gave you permission to throw this party on my property?" Emily demanded, her voice shaking with rage. Mark's smile widened. "Oh, this courtyard and pool are now part of our HOA's shared amenities. You must have missed the notices we sent out. It's public property now." Emily stared at him, dumbfounded. "Notices? You have no right to claim my property as your own. This is private land. You're trespassing. I'm calling the police if you don't leave immediately." Mark shrugged, unfazed. "Call them if you want, but it's public property now, as far as the HOA is concerned. We've got the paperwork to back this up. In fact, you need to leave now. You're not a member after all. This party is for HOA members only." Emily's hands clenched into fists as she struggled to contain her anger. She turned away, her mind racing. She knew she had to act fast. Emily called the police, her hands shaking as she explained the situation. When the officers arrived, they quickly dispersed the crowd, but not without resistance from Mark and the HOA members. Mark loudly proclaimed that he would sue the city for unlawful eviction from HOA property, but the officers stood their ground, citing Emily's clear ownership of the property. After the last of the partygoers had left, Emily stepped outside into the wreckage they had left behind. The courtyard was a mess. Empty bottles floated in the pool, her flower beds were trampled, and the smell of smoke and sweat lingered in the air. She sank into one of the soggy patio chairs, staring at the water as tears welled in her eyes. Daniel would have hated this. He had worked so hard to make this place theirs, and now it felt like a piece of him had been stolen along with her peace of mind. That night, Emily stayed awake for hours, replaying the confrontation in her head. She knew this wasn't the end of it. The HOA would come back, and next time, it might be even worse. A few weeks later, Emily noticed something very odd. Her pool water had a strange film, and the courtyard reeked of chemicals. When she stepped outside that morning, the acrid smell hit her first, a sharp, chemical tang that made her eyes water and her stomach churn. The pool was unrecognizable. The once clear water was now a murky, iridescent film that shimmered in the sunlight like an oil slick. The edges of the courtyard, where the grass had been lush and green, were now burnt patches of brown, curling and blackened as if the earth itself had been poisoned. Emily's heart sank as she walked closer, trying to process the destruction. It wasn't just the pool. The stone pavers surrounding it were stained with strange, greasy streaks, and the garden beds she and Daniel had planted were wilting as if they had been drenched in acid. The sight was surreal, a grotesque mockery of the peaceful retreat they had worked so hard to create. Emily immediately reviewed the footage from her security cameras, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The video showed Mark Thompson sneaking onto her property in the dead of night with two accomplices, carrying jugs of unknown substances. They poured the liquid not just into the pool but onto the surrounding area, methodically ensuring maximum damage. Mark's calm demeanor was chilling. He moved with the precision of someone who believed he was untouchable. Emily called the police immediately and showed them the footage. They took it seriously, and an investigation confirmed that they had poured industrial-strength cleaning chemicals into the water, rendering it unusable. With the video evidence in hand, Emily filed charges against Mark Thompson and the HOA for vandalism and trespassing. The legal battle was grueling, dragging on far longer than she had anticipated. The HOA's lawyer was relentless, filing motion after motion to delay proceedings. Each delay felt like a gut punch, another reminder of how difficult it was to stand up to an organization with resources and connections. But Emily wasn't alone. Her non-HOA neighbors rallied around her in ways she hadn't expected. Mrs. Keller, an elderly widow who lived 2 houses down, left a basket of baked goods on her doorstep with a note that read, "We're rooting for you." John, a retired contractor across the street, offered to help her document the repairs and estimate the costs of the damage for the court. Even strangers reached out, sharing their own experiences of fighting overzealous HOAs and offering words of encouragement. Despite the support, there were moments of despair. Sitting in the courtroom, listening to Mark spin his lies about her property being a hazard, Emily felt a mix of rage and helplessness. He painted himself as a concerned community leader, claiming his actions were in the best interest of the neighborhood. His lawyer leaned into this narrative, arguing that the HOA had a duty to address safety concerns, even if it meant overstepping boundaries. But Emily fought back, armed with the truth. Her lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Clara, dismantled their arguments piece by piece, presenting the security footage and expert testimonies. The turning point came when the judge directly questioned Mark, asking him to explain why he didn't report his so-called concerns to the authorities instead of taking matters into his own hands. Mark's flustered response was a small but satisfying victory. When the verdict finally came, finding Mark Thompson guilty of vandalism and the HOA responsible for damages, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The judge's words sank in, each syllable breaking the chains of fear and frustration she had carried for so long. Across the courtroom, Mark's smug expression evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. He shifted in his seat, as though trying to outrun the consequences now crashing down on him. The judge's gavel fell like the final punctuation mark on a long, painful chapter. Emily's lawyer offered a small, triumphant smile, but Emily was already turning to look at the rows of neighbors behind her, faces filled with quiet pride and solidarity. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer, overwhelming release of justice finally being done. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. The aftermath of the trial was more than just emotional. The financial toll was staggering. Draining the pool, replacing the damaged filters, testing for residual contamination, and restoring the landscaping were all necessary before Emily could even think about using the space again. Every invoice felt like another blow, a reminder of the violation she had endured. But the worst part was knowing that the damage wasn't accidental. It was calculated, deliberate, and deeply personal. Emily received full compensation for the pool repairs and even managed to get a court order preventing the HOA from ever claiming her property again. The HOA was dissolved for abuse of power and misconduct, and Mark Thompson faced jail time for his actions. The dissolution of the HOA sent ripples through the neighborhood, and the changes were immediate and profound. Neighbors who had been silent under the HOA's rule began sharing their stories, and what Emily learned was both heartbreaking and validating. Mrs. Keller confided in her about the fines she had accumulated over the years for her rose bushes, which she had planted with her late husband. John revealed how the HOA had forced him to repaint his house twice in 1 year because the color wasn't uniform. Maria and Hector, a couple across the street, had almost lost their home after the HOA imposed hefty fines for an unauthorized vegetable garden in their backyard. As the neighborhood began to rebuild itself without the HOA, a sense of camaraderie emerged that hadn't been there before. Neighbors started talking more, helping each other with small projects, and sharing resources. Mrs. Keller's rose bushes grew tall and vibrant again, and John finally painted his house the bold shade of blue he had always wanted. Maria and Hector's vegetable garden flourished, with neighbors stopping by to admire their tomatoes and cucumbers. One evening, the neighborhood gathered at Maria and Hector's house for a block party, the first true community event they had had in years. There were no rules or flyers, no board members scrutinizing every detail. Just neighbors coming together to celebrate, to share food and laughter, and to reclaim what the HOA had tried to take away. As Emily looked around at the smiling faces, she felt a deep sense of pride. Her fight against the HOA hadn't just been about her property. It had been about standing up for all of them. And in the end, it had brought them closer together. In the quiet weeks after the court case ended, Emily finally had the chance to reflect. The battle had left scars, emotional and financial, but it had also taught her that in the face of an oppressive organization, the kindness and solidarity of a few good people were enough to tip the scales. And for that, she would always be grateful. Standing up for herself hadn't been easy, and there were moments when she had wanted to give up, to let them win just to regain some semblance of peace. But every time she felt like quitting, she thought about Daniel and everything they had built together. This place wasn't just a home. It was a testament to their love and hard work. Letting them take that away would have been more than a loss. It would have been a betrayal of everything they had fought for. Through this ordeal, Emily also came to understand the true meaning of community. It wasn't the rigid, rule-obsessed system the HOA had tried to impose. Real community was found in the kindness of neighbors who stood by her, the strangers who shared their stories, and the small gestures of support that reminded her she wasn't alone. In the face of entitlement and power, it was these acts of solidarity that gave her the strength to keep fighting. The process of rebuilding her pool became a healing journey. Draining the pool, scrubbing away the last traces of the chemicals, and replanting the garden beds felt like reclaiming not just her courtyard, but her sense of self. She spent days out there, kneeling in the dirt, planting new flowers to replace the ones that had withered. Each blossom that bloomed felt like a small victory, a reminder that life could thrive again after destruction. When the repairs were finally complete, Emily stood at the edge of the pool, watching as the sunlight danced on its clear surface. The water was calm, reflecting the sky above like a mirror. Next to her sat Daniel's favorite chair, the one he had always claimed during their evenings by the pool. She had debated replacing it after the incident, as it bore a few scuffs and scratches from the chaos, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Instead, she had repaired and cleaned it, polishing the wood until it gleamed. It felt like a small way to keep him with her, a reminder of all the times they had shared in this space. In the chair's armrest, Emily found the faint etching of their initials, D+E, something Daniel must have carved when she wasn't looking. She traced the grooves with her fingers, feeling a bittersweet warmth in her chest. He had always been her partner in everything, and in a way, she felt like he still was. Every step of this journey, from fighting the HOA to rebuilding their haven, had been guided by the love and strength they had built together. One evening, as Emily sat by the pool with a glass of iced tea, she noticed Mrs. Keller peeking over the fence. "It looks beautiful," she said, her voice warm and sincere. Emily smiled, inviting her to come over. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives and the neighborhood they both loved. It was a simple moment, but it felt profound, a reminder that the connections we forge with others can be as healing as any amount of repair. With the HOA dissolved and Mark Thompson behind bars, Willow Creek began to heal. The neighborhood, once stifled by rigid rules and overbearing control, started to breathe again. The air felt lighter, as if an invisible weight had been lifted. Neighbors who had been silent under the HOA's rule began to share their stories, and the sense of camaraderie that emerged was both heartwarming and validating. Emily Carter, now a local hero, found herself at the center of this newfound community spirit. Her courage to stand up against the HOA had inspired others to reclaim their autonomy and take pride in their homes. The once uniform streets of Willow Creek now boasted a vibrant array of colors, with mismatched mailboxes, wildflower gardens, and bold front door hues. The neighborhood was alive with individuality, a stark contrast to the sterile conformity the HOA had enforced. But for Emily, the victory was bittersweet. While she had won the legal battle and restored her property, the emotional scars from the ordeal lingered. The memories of the HOA's invasion and the destruction of her beloved courtyard still haunted her. She often found herself double-checking the locks on her gates and doors, a habit she hadn't had before. The fear that the HOA, or someone like it, might return was always at the back of her mind. Just as Emily began to settle into her new normal, a fresh challenge arose. One morning, she received a letter from the city council. The envelope was official, stamped with the city's seal, and the contents sent a chill down her spine. The letter informed her that her property was being considered for a new urban development project, a high-rise apartment complex that would require the demolition of several homes in Willow Creek, including hers. Emily's heart raced as she read the details. The project was being spearheaded by a powerful real estate developer, one with deep pockets and political connections. The letter claimed that the development would bring economic growth and modernization to the area, but Emily knew better. This was just another attempt to strip the neighborhood of its character and displace its residents. She immediately called a meeting with her neighbors, and the turnout was overwhelming. The community center was packed with concerned residents, all eager to hear what Emily had to say. She stood at the front of the room, her voice steady but filled with determination. "This isn't just about my home," she began. "This is about all of us. They want to take away what makes Willow Creek special, our homes, our gardens, our sense of community. But we fought the HOA, and we won. We can fight this too." The room erupted in applause, and Emily felt a surge of hope. The same spirit that had brought them together to defeat the HOA was still alive, and she knew they could channel it once again. The fight against the development project quickly gained momentum. Emily and her neighbors organized protests, circulated petitions, and reached out to local media to raise awareness. They even enlisted the help of a young, ambitious journalist named Sarah, who had covered Emily's battle against the HOA and was eager to shine a light on this new injustice. Sarah's articles brought national attention to Willow Creek, and soon, the story was picked up by major news outlets. The public outcry was overwhelming, with people from across the country expressing their support for the residents of Willow Creek. The pressure on the city council and the developer began to mount. But the developer, a shrewd businessman named Victor Langston, wasn't about to back down. He had faced opposition before and had always found a way to come out on top. He saw Willow Creek as a prime piece of real estate, and he was determined to get it, no matter the cost. The city council held a public hearing to discuss the development project, and Emily and her neighbors were ready. They packed the council chambers, holding signs and chanting slogans. Emily was given the opportunity to speak, and she delivered a passionate plea. Willow Creek is more than just a neighborhood, she said, her voice ringing out. It's a community. It's a place where people have built their lives, raised their families, and created memories. This development project would destroy all of that. It would take away our homes, our history, and our future. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for what's right. Her words resonated with everyone in the room, and even some of the council members seemed moved. But Victor Langston was unmoved. He took the podium next, his demeanor calm and collected. Progress is inevitable, he said, his voice smooth and persuasive. This development will bring jobs, housing, and economic growth to the area. It's for the greater good. Sometimes, sacrifices have to be made for the sake of progress. Emily clenched her fists, her anger simmering just below the surface. She knew his words were empty, designed to mask his greed and ambition. But she also knew that she couldn't let him win. As the battle raged on, Emily received an unexpected visitor. It was Mark Thompson, the former HOA president, now out on parole. He looked different, humbled, almost broken. Emily was wary, but she agreed to hear him out. I know I don't deserve your trust, Mark began, his voice trembling. But I want to make things right. I know things about Victor Langston, things that could help you stop him. Emily's eyes narrowed. Why should I believe you? Mark sighed. Because I was just like him. I thought I could control everything, that I was untouchable. But I was wrong. And now, I see what I was a part of. I don't want to see this neighborhood destroyed. I want to help. Emily hesitated, but she knew she couldn't afford to turn down any potential allies. She agreed to listen, and what Mark revealed was shocking. Victor Langston had a history of shady dealings, including bribing city officials and falsifying environmental impact reports. If they could prove it, they could stop the development project in its tracks. With Mark's information, Emily and her neighbors launched a full-scale investigation. They worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and building their case. It was a race against time, as the city council was set to vote on the development project in just a few weeks. The night before the vote, Emily stood in her courtyard, looking out at the pool and gardens she had fought so hard to protect. She thought about Daniel, about all the memories they had created in this space. She thought about her neighbors, about the community they had built together. She knew she couldn't let it all be destroyed. The next day, the city council chambers were packed once again. Emily and her team presented their evidence, exposing Victor Langston's corruption and the true cost of the development project. The room was silent as the council members deliberated, the tension palpable. Finally, the council president stood to announce the decision. After careful consideration, he began, "We have decided to reject the proposed development project. The evidence presented today has made it clear that this project is not in the best interest of the community." The room erupted in cheers, and Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had done it. They had saved Willow Creek. With the development project defeated, Willow Creek entered a new era. The neighborhood was stronger and more united than ever, and the sense of community was palpable. Emily became a symbol of resilience and courage, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, it was possible to stand up for what was right. The courtyard, once a battleground, was now a place of peace and reflection. Emily spent her evenings there, sitting by the pool and watching the sun set over the horizon. She knew that the fight wasn't over. There would always be new challenges to face, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. As she sat in Daniel's favorite chair, tracing the initials carved into the armrest, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had fought for her home, for her community, and for the memories she held dear. And in doing so, she had found a new sense of purpose and belonging. Willow Creek was more than just a neighborhood. It was a testament to the power of community, resilience, and the human spirit. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emily knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.